AITA for telling my friend I won't pay for her food anymore because she never pays me back. I'm a 25-year-old woman who's been working at my current job for about 5 years now, and during that time, I've gotten really close with a coworker, who I'll call Sarah. Sarah is 30, and from the start, we just clicked. We bonded over similar interests, shared jokes, and talked about everything from work stress to random life stuff. I even got to know her family, and her little daughter calls me auntie, which is super sweet. We're the kind of friends who text every day, even when we're not at work, and I consider her one of my closest friends at this point. But there's this one thing that's been bothering me, and I'm not sure if I'm overthinking it or if there's really an issue. So, here's the deal. I know Sarah struggles with money. She's mentioned it before, and it's pretty obvious. We make the same salary at work, but our situations are very different. I'm single, living alone, paying my own bills, and managing my student loans. I don't have a lot of extra cash, maybe about $40 a week after all my expenses are covered. Sarah, on the other hand, is married, has a husband who doesn't work, and a young daughter. The thing is, her husband actually has a degree, but he's not working, and she's been the one paying off his student loans. I've always thought that was a little weird, but it's not my place to judge their arrangement. Still, I can tell that she's stretched pretty thin financially, and I sympathize. So, this all started a few months ago. I noticed that Sarah was skipping lunch at work pretty regularly. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe she was trying to save money or wasn't hungry. But after a few days, I got concerned. We're close, so I asked her, "Hey, you're not eating lunch, are you okay?" She just smiled and said she forgot her lunch at home, but she was fine. I told her that I was going to run out and grab something to eat, and asked if she wanted me to pick her up anything. She hesitated for a moment, but then said yes, and that she'd just PayPal me the money when I got back. So, I went, got the food, and came back. I handed her the lunch, and she thanked me. I waited a bit, figuring I'd see a notification from PayPal pop up on my phone, but it never did. I didn't want to make it awkward, so I let it go, thinking maybe she just forgot. I assumed she'd remember and get me back the next time, and she did. A couple of days later, she showed up with Starbucks for me, and I figured we were even. I appreciated the gesture and thought that was the end of it. But then it happened again. The next few times I went out to grab a quick bite before work, Sarah asked if I could pick her up something. I said sure, and she assured me she'd pay me back, but each time, the payment never came. It wasn't even about the money at first, just a few dollars here and there, but it started to add up. Then, there was this one week where she asked me to get her lunch a couple of times. Again, she said she'd PayPal me, and again, she didn't. I noticed it was becoming a pattern, and I was starting to feel a little uncomfortable. Then, one day she told me she'd pay for our lunch because I had been picking it up so often. We went out, and when it was time to pay, she fumbled around in her bag and said she couldn't find her card. She asked if I could cover it and promised she'd send me the money later. But of course, she never did. At this point, I was getting frustrated. I mean, I get that money is tight for her, but it's tight for me, too. I don't have a lot of extra cash, and these little expenses were starting to eat into my budget. Most recently, we had this incident with Dunkin' Donuts. I had sent her a $10 gift card so she could pick up my order when she went, and I told her she could keep whatever change was left over, which should have only been like $1 or so. When she got back, she handed me my order and casually mentioned that someone had paid it forward and covered the whole thing. She said she'd send me back the gift card since she didn't use it. I thought that was really nice of whoever did that, but guess what? She never sent the gift card back. That's when I started to feel like maybe this was becoming a bit of a pattern with her, and not just her forgetting here and there. The final straw was a few days ago. I got up to go grab lunch, and Sarah asked me where I was headed. I told her, and she immediately asked if I could pick her up something, too. By now, I was tired of paying for things and not getting paid back, so I tried to find a way to avoid the situation without making it weird. I asked her if she could just mobile order it, and I'd pick it up for her. She said the place didn't have mobile ordering, which I knew wasn't true because I'd done it myself before. So, I suggested she come with me and we could just split the order, but she said she had a meeting and couldn't leave the office. Finally, I said, well, if you give me your card, I can take care of it, trying to gently let her know that I wasn't paying for this one. She hesitated and said she'd just PayPal me the money later, and I told her if she did it right then, that would work. That's when she started to push back, saying she couldn't because she didn't know exactly how much it'd be. I was getting really frustrated because I didn't want to have to spell it out, but she kept pushing. I told her that I honestly only had enough money on my card for one meal, which was true, and she asked me what was really going on. She said, "Didn't we just get paid?" That's when I just snapped. I told her, every time I've paid for something for you or given you money, I never get it back. I just don't have the extra money anymore, and it's starting to affect my own budget. I didn't say it in a mean way, but I was firm because I felt like I needed to set a boundary. She looked completely shocked, like she couldn't believe I'd just said that to her, and then she got really quiet. A few minutes later, she grabbed her stuff and left work early, saying she wasn't feeling well. Now, I feel awful. I know she's struggling, and I really do care about her, but I'm tired of being taken advantage of. I didn't mean to hurt her feelings, but I also couldn't keep lying about why I didn't want to pick up food for her anymore. One of my other coworkers, who knows the situation, told me that I should have just kept making excuses, but I didn't see why I should have to lie, especially when Sarah kept pressing me. So, I don't know. Am I the asshole for finally telling her how I feel? Or was I justified in setting that boundary, even if it hurt her feelings? Update 1. A few days after our awkward exchange at work, I honestly thought Sarah and I would have a little distance between us for a while. I figured she needed some time to cool off, and I wasn't sure if I should reach out or give her space. But then, out of the blue, I got a text from her that weekend. She messaged me saying she was feeling a bit bored and suggested we hang out, maybe grab coffee at this cute little cafe that had recently opened nearby. I was a little surprised, especially since she hadn't really acknowledged what had happened at work, but I thought maybe this was her way of trying to patch things up. I genuinely didn't want to lose our friendship over this, so I agreed. We met up at the cafe the next day, and when I got there, Sarah was already waiting. She greeted me with a big smile, like nothing had ever happened, and for a second, I felt relieved. I thought maybe I had been overthinking everything, and maybe things would just go back to normal. We chatted a bit about work, the weather, her daughter's new obsession with some cartoon character. It was all really casual, and I felt myself relaxing. I ordered a coffee and a croissant, trying to keep it light since I was still on a budget, and I was expecting Sarah to do the same. But when it was her turn to order, she went all out. Sarah ordered a large iced coffee, a breakfast sandwich, a side of fruit, and even a slice of cake. It caught me off guard, but I didn't say anything because maybe she was just treating herself, which I could totally understand. I tried to ignore the slight twinge of anxiety I felt, reminding myself that we were just here to catch up and have a good time. We found a cozy spot near the window, and we sat there for a while, just talking and enjoying our food. It honestly felt like old times, and I was glad I'd agreed to meet her. But then the check arrived, and that's when things took a turn. The waiter placed the bill on the table, and without missing a beat, Sarah slid it over to me. I was confused at first, thinking she was just handing it to me to split or something, but then she casually said, "You got this, right?" It was like she didn't even think twice about it, and it took me a second to process what was happening. I was caught completely off guard. I hadn't expected her to ask me to cover her meal, especially after everything that had happened. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, and just told her that I wasn't going to pay for her food. I thought it was straightforward enough, but Sarah looked genuinely shocked, like she couldn't believe I'd said that. She laughed a little, as if she thought I was joking, and then she said, "Wait, really?" It was clear she still wasn't getting it, and I could feel my face starting to burn with embarrassment because now I could tell that people around us were starting to notice. A couple at the next table glanced over, clearly curious about what was going on, and I felt like everyone in the cafe could hear us. I repeated, more firmly this time, that I was only paying for my own food, and I could see the confusion in her eyes. It was like she genuinely didn't understand why I wasn't just going to cover her meal like I'd done so many times before. She asked, almost in a whisper, why I wouldn't just pay for her, as if this was a normal thing between us, and the reality of it hit me hard. She really didn't see anything wrong with what she was doing. It wasn't just a one-off thing, this had become an expectation for her. I was so embarrassed, but I wasn't about to back down. I explained, probably a little too quickly, that I just didn't have the extra money to keep paying for both of us, especially when she never paid me back. I could tell that wasn't the answer she was looking for, and her expression changed. She didn't look hurt or angry, she just looked confused, like she was trying to figure out why I had suddenly changed the rules of our friendship. It felt like the longest few minutes of my life, and I could feel the tension hanging heavy between us. By this point, I could tell that other people were definitely paying attention. I saw one of the waiters glance over, clearly trying to assess if we were going to cause a scene, and I just wanted to crawl under the table, but Sarah still didn't get it. She asked me one more time, sounding almost hurt, "Why won't you pay for my food?" It was like she was so used to me picking up the tab that she couldn't understand why I wouldn't do it now, even after everything that had happened before. I could feel the eyes of the people around us on me, and it was all I could do to keep my voice steady as I said, "Because I'm not your wallet, Sarah." I saw her face fall, and for a moment, I thought she was going to argue with me. But then she just sat back, almost deflated, and didn't say anything. The awkward silence stretched on, and eventually, the waiter came over to see if we needed anything. Sarah mumbled that we'd split the check, and I nodded, relieved that we were finally moving past this. We each paid for our own food, and it was like a dark cloud had settled over our table. After we left the cafe, we stood on the sidewalk for a moment, not really knowing what to say to each other. I could tell she wanted to say something, but I didn't have the energy to try to smooth things over. I just said, "I'll see you at work," and she nodded before walking away. It was such a weird, anticlimactic ending to what should have been a fun hangout, and I felt a mix of sadness, frustration, and relief. Part of me wonders if I should have handled it differently, maybe had a more direct conversation with her sooner, but I don't know if it would have made a difference. I still feel conflicted because I don't want her to think I'm abandoning her, but I also don't want to be in a friendship where I'm just seen as a way to cover someone else's expenses. So, I'm left wondering if I did the right thing, or if I'm just overreacting to something that I should have let slide. Update 2. A couple of weeks after the incident at the cafe, things were still awkward between Sarah and me at work. We'd talk about surface-level stuff and exchange polite smiles, but it felt like there was this invisible wall between us. I was still trying to process everything that had happened, and part of me was sad because I missed how easy our friendship used to be. I thought maybe she'd want to address what happened, but she never brought it up, and I wasn't sure how to start that conversation either. Then, one day out of the blue, she sent me a text asking if I wanted to come over for dinner. She said she had a new recipe she wanted to try out, and she thought it'd be fun if we could just hang out and relax. I was hesitant. I didn't want a repeat of the last 2 times where things had gone south, but I also didn't want to make things even more awkward by refusing. So, I told her I'd come over, and she seemed genuinely excited, which made me feel a little more hopeful. Maybe this was her way of trying to mend things, and maybe we could just have a nice, chill evening like we used to. The evening of the dinner, I drove over to Sarah's place and was greeted with her usual cheerful smile. She seemed completely normal, like she'd forgotten all about the awkwardness at the cafe, and I decided I'd try to do the same for the sake of our friendship. We spent the first hour or so just catching up, laughing about some silly work drama, and reminiscing about funny things that had happened over the years. It felt good, like a tiny glimpse of how things used to be, and I was grateful for that. Sarah had already set the table, and she'd prepared a full meal: pasta, garlic bread, a salad, even a little dessert. I was impressed because it looked like she'd put a lot of effort into it. She mentioned how she'd been experimenting with cooking lately, trying out new dishes, and she was glad she could finally have someone over to share it with. The food was really good, and we ended up having a pretty nice time. For a while, I thought maybe this was her way of saying sorry for how things had been, a peace offering of sorts, and I let myself relax. But then, as we were finishing up dessert, she casually mentioned that she'd be right back and disappeared into the kitchen. I thought she was just grabbing something, but when she came back, she had a piece of paper in her hand. I didn't really think much of it until she placed it on the table and slid it over to me. I picked it up, and my heart sank. It was a bill. She'd actually written out a check for the dinner, complete with the cost of the ingredients and everything. At first, I thought it had to be a joke, some weird attempt at humor, but she looked at me with this completely straight face and said I owed her for the meal because she had cooked it. I was stunned. I didn't even know what to say. I just sat there, staring at this makeshift invoice, trying to make sense of what was happening. I couldn't believe that after everything, she still didn't get it. She had invited me over for dinner, and now she was expecting me to pay for it as if I'd ordered a meal at a restaurant. I felt a mix of confusion, frustration, and honestly, a little bit of anger. I thought we were hanging out as friends, and here she was, turning it into some kind of transactional thing again. I tried to process what she was saying, but all I could think about was how absurd it was. She kept insisting that she'd spent money and time making the meal, so it was only fair that I cover the cost. It was like she genuinely didn't see how weird and inappropriate this was. I couldn't believe she'd thought it was okay to spring this on me after inviting me over. I thought we were trying to reconnect, not set up some kind of financial arrangement. I told her, as calmly as I could, that I wasn't going to pay for a home-cooked meal when she had invited me over as a guest. I tried to explain that this wasn't how friends treated each other, but she just looked at me like I was the one being unreasonable. She kept insisting that she'd gone out of her way to cook, and that it wasn't fair for her to spend money on groceries and not get reimbursed. She even broke down the cost of each item on the plate, like she'd thought it through before I'd even arrived. I could feel my hands starting to shake as I looked down at the bill. I didn't want to make a scene, but I also didn't want to just pay and set a precedent that this was okay. But Sarah kept pressing, and I could see this was going to turn into another uncomfortable standoff like at the cafe, except worse, because we were alone, and I didn't have an easy way to escape. I just wanted to leave at this point, so I did something I'm still not sure was the right move. I counted out the cash for what I'd eaten, put it on the table, and told her that I hoped she had a good night. I didn't even wait to see her reaction. I grabbed my bag and left, feeling this awful mix of sadness and disbelief. As I was walking to my car, I kept thinking, is this really happening? Is this what our friendship has turned into? I felt humiliated, like I'd been tricked into a situation where I had no good options. I'd thought she'd invited me over to make peace, to find a way back to the friendship we used to have, but it was like she saw me as nothing more than someone she could squeeze money out of. Update 3. A few days after the uncomfortable dinner incident, I still hadn't heard from Sarah. I wasn't sure what to expect, maybe an apology, or at least an acknowledgement of how awkward and strange the whole thing had been, but there was nothing, just silence. Part of me was relieved, honestly. I needed some space to figure out how I felt about everything, and it seemed like she was giving it to me. But then, just as I was starting to move on, she messaged me. I saw her name pop up on my phone, and my stomach dropped. I hesitated before opening the message, half expecting her to pretend like everything was normal again. Instead, she had written a long message asking why I hadn't been willing to pay for her at dinner. She didn't sound angry or confrontational. If anything, she sounded genuinely confused, like she couldn't understand why I had reacted the way I did. I was stunned. After everything that had happened, the cafe incident, the awkward bill at her place, I thought it was clear why I was uncomfortable. But here she was, acting like I was the one being unreasonable. I remember reading her message over and over, trying to wrap my head around it. She said things like, "I just don't get why you're acting like this, and it's not like I was asking for much." It was like she had completely missed the point of why I was upset. I had been trying to set a boundary, to make it clear that I wasn't comfortable with this dynamic anymore, but it seemed like she didn't see it that way. After a lot of thought, I decided to respond. I didn't want to leave things hanging, and maybe if we could just talk it out, we could clear up whatever misunderstanding was happening. I carefully explained, again, that I didn't think it was fair for her to keep expecting me to pay for things, especially when I hadn't agreed to it and it was starting to affect my finances. I thought that would make things clearer, but her reply just made everything even more confusing. She told me she was surprised that I had a problem paying for her because, to her, it was a completely normal thing. I couldn't believe what I was reading. She said she didn't understand why I was acting like it was such a big deal because, from her perspective, it was just the way things worked. That's when she dropped the bombshell. She said that, as a woman, she enjoyed being treated, and she was used to men paying for her when they went out. Since I had started paying for her, she had just assumed it was the same kind of situation, and that I liked treating her the way a boyfriend might. I was absolutely floored. I had no idea she thought of it like that. I didn't even know how to respond because it was so far from what I had been thinking. I thought I was just being nice, picking up the tab here and there, maybe helping her out when she was having a tough week. I had no intention of setting up some kind of unspoken agreement where I was always the one footing the bill. But apparently, that's how she'd been seeing it. She explained that she liked it when I paid because it made her feel taken care of, and that when she saw I was willing to do it once, she thought it meant I was okay with it continuing. She even went so far as to say that, since her husband wasn't really stepping up financially, she appreciated that someone was. It was as if she was justifying everything by saying that, in her mind, this was a normal, even sweet, thing for me to do as her friend. She pointed out that she didn't mind asking for things because she thought I liked doing it. I realized, with a sinking feeling, that this wasn't just about the money. For her, it had become an emotional thing, where she felt cared for and supported, and she couldn't see why I was suddenly taking that away. I felt so many emotions reading her messages. I was angry that she had put me in this position, without ever asking if I was okay with it. I was hurt that she didn't understand how much pressure it had put on me, and I was also genuinely confused because it was such a twisted way to interpret our friendship. I realized that somewhere along the way, what I thought was a small gesture of kindness had been completely misread by her, and she had built up this whole narrative around it. But the part that really got to me was when she said that she thought paying for her made me feel good, too. She seemed to think that, because I kept doing it, I must have been getting something out of it, like a sense of pride or satisfaction from taking care of someone. It was like she'd convinced herself that my actions had been about more than just helping out a friend. She saw them as me playing a role that she was comfortable with. I didn't know how to make her see that this was never what I intended, and I started to realize that maybe we had completely different ideas of what our friendship was supposed to be. The more I thought about it, the more I started to understand why she'd never seen a problem. She wasn't trying to be manipulative, at least not in a conscious way. She had built up this idea in her head that it was normal for me to pay because it made her feel special, and she assumed it must make me feel good, too. But what she didn't see was that I felt trapped by the expectation, and it had started to make me resent her. I had felt obligated to keep paying, not because I wanted to, but because I didn't know how to say no without making things weird. Am I an AITA? I'm interested in your opinion.